Well, hello everyone, and welcome to today's Reviving Veterinary Medicine webinar. We're so glad you could join us. I'm very happy that you're here on a Tuesday evening. Wednesday evening, what day is it? My name is Andrea Cluley, and I'm a regional sales director in the Pacific Northwest with Trupanion, and we are very excited to sponsor tonight's talk. We know that cost of conversations sorry, excuse me, we know that the cost conversations can be difficult to have with a client, especially when their beloved pet is sick or injured unexpectedly. It can really be very stressful for everyone. A simple conversation about the importance of pet insurance early in that pet's life can really help alleviate a lot of the stress and change the dynamic of the conversation that you have with your clients. And so that's what we're kind of here to help with tonight. Before I introduce tonight's speaker, I'd like to share a little bit about Trupanion. Our mission is to help the pets we all love receive the best veterinary care. Two ways we're able to do this is with our patented Vet Direct Pay technology option, which allows us to pay an invoice directly to the hospital at the time of checkout. When we pay a hospital directly, the client only has to pay their portion of the remaining bill, which greatly reduces out-of-pocket costs and expenses for your client at that time. Our innovative technology also helps with the client experience, client compliance and retention, helps to contribute to your pharmacy sales, minimizes credit card transaction fees, which can certainly add up over time, and quite a bit more. We're able to provide an easy way to introduce the concept of insurance to clients through our exam day offer as well. This offer, upon activation, gives a client immediate Trupanion insurance coverage with an exam, or after an exam, with no upfront cost for 30 days. This protection provides pet parents peace of mind, allowing them to do their research and decide if insurance is right for them and the right choice for their family, while helping you build your insured client base. For more information about Trupanion, please go ahead and scan the QR code that'll show up at the end of the webinar tonight and in the post-event email. Just a really quick reminder, tonight's session is approved for 1 hour of non-medical CE credit, which is RACE approved. Attendees must stay for the majority of the live session to be eligible, and certificates will be emailed to eligible participants within the next week or so. Please ask us questions during this. We'll hopefully have time at the end to do a little Q&A. And so you can ask questions to us using the chat box or the Q&A feature, either one. And then we'll follow up at the end. And then for any technical issues you might be experiencing, attendees can reach out to us via the chat as well. All right, now, without further ado, I would love to introduce tonight's speaker, Dr. Marie Holloway-Chuck. Dr. Marie Holloway-Chuck is a board-certified emergency and critical care specialist. She's the founder of Reviving Veterinary Medicine and a passionate advocate for well-being in the veterinary community. She's also the author of the recently published book, A Compassionate Calling: What It Really Means to Be a Veterinarian. Today, she's going to offer some grounded real-world guidance to help veterinary teams handle money conversations with confidence, reduce the emotional strain these discussions create, and use clear communications to support both clients and pets. So, Dr. Holloway-Chuck, take it away for us. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Andrea. And yes, thank you so much to Trupanion for their generous sponsorship of this session. This is such a top of mind topic for this time of year, especially. I think many of us who are working in practice can really attest to the fact that budgets are very tight for our clients this time of year. Everybody's balancing a lot of different things, and it can be really tough to have these conversations and to find common ground. So we're going to talk all about how to navigate cost of care talks, as well as what to do when things really escalate, because of course that's something, unfortunately, that we can see as well. So by the end of today, I hope that all of you will come away knowing how to approach cost conversations with clarity, compassion, and confidence, that you can also recognize emotional triggers and de-escalate tension when it comes to discussing finances with clients, that you can set clear expectations while still maintaining those strong client relationships, and that hopefully you can use language that fosters trust and transparency So we're going to be unpacking a whole lot tonight. Like Andrea said, please do share your questions and we will do our best to get to those either during the webinar, at the end of the webinar, or in follow-up correspondence. So I was really surprised when I came across this stat. This is a recent report called Pet Lifetime of Care. It was published by the American Veterinary Medical Association a few months ago that revealed that almost 8 of 10 pet owners underestimate the total lifetime cost of pet care. And 1 in 2 pet owners say they are increasingly worried about unexpected expenses. So, to put this into reference for you, the realities of pet care costs are astounding. And I didn't note this, but this is in US dollars. And so, even more painful for those of us who function in Canadian dollars. But the reality is that the cost of care for a dog, depending on its size and how long it lives, can run anywhere between $20 and more than $60,000. For cats, a little bit less expensive, between about $20 and $50,000. Now, what is it that pet owners expected based on this report? Most dog owners said, oh, over the course of my dog's lifetime, it'll be less than 10 grand. And for cats, less than 6 grand. So there is a huge disparity there. And this really highlights the fact that it is so important that we talk about cost from the moment our pet owners are adopting their dogs and cats. They have to have a realistic expectation about what owning a pet really means. And we see the ramifications of this when we don't talk about costs. This is a recent study that came out of the Journal of Vet Med Sciences, where they analyzed client complaints and their effects on veterinary support staff. And they said that 1/3 of veterinary support staff reported being subject to a client complaint in the previous 6 months. Cost of care was the most common reason. 80% of those complaints were due to cost. 47 of those support staff reported feeling depressed because of complaints. Half of them said that they negatively affected their enjoyment of the job, and 27% said they were considering changing their career because of client complaints. So this is huge. This has major lasting ramifications. And we see the same thing among small animal veterinary internal medicine specialists. This was research that came out a few years ago now, whereby about 2/3 of internists had received a complaint over the last 6 months. Again, half of those were related to cost. When we dug a little bit deeper into this literature among internists, about 1/3 worry about client complaints most of the time or all of the time. The same were verbally assaulted by a client in the previous 6 months. 29% were threatened with litigation during the previous 6 months, and 44% had considered changing their career because of complaints made against them. Complaints are huge, and knowing that a lot of complaints stem from cost of care, we really want to nip this in the bud or approach it head on. So I don't know about you, as somebody who works in the ER, mostly, as well as the intensive care unit, nobody expects, to have to come into the ER. Nobody is planning or budgeting, really, for the most part, for trips to the ER. And I don't know about you, but the words or phrases that I dread hearing the most from my clients are, how much is that going to cost? And I can always tell as I'm going through, a presumptive diagnosis, a prognosis, a treatment plan, a diagnostic plan with a family, that I can just see the tension rising until finally the elephant in the room presents itself, which is, okay, and how much is that? Now, I think a lot of us get uncomfortable when it comes to discussing cost because money brings up a lot of stuff, right? All of us feel a little bit anxious or have a lot of emotions around the topic of money. And there's whole books written about the psychology of money. If you haven't had the chance to read Morgan Housel's book, I highly recommend it. It's a fascinating read all about money, our thoughts on money, where those thoughts come from, and how those thoughts determine how we spend and save money through the course of our lifetime. Well, just imagine we're all human beings coming into the veterinary workplace, and so we are all processing our own psychology around money. And at the end of the day, there seems to be this belief system that finances equal care and compassion. So, from the pet owner's perspective, they might be thinking, well, if you really cared, you would just do veterinary work for free. The veterinary team, on the other hand, is thinking, well, if they really want to do what's best for their pet, they should pay for the surgery. Or, you know what? You're a vet tech. You're supposed to love animals. Well, of course, vet techs love animals. But we, on the other hand, are thinking, well, they shouldn't have a pet if they can't afford its veterinary care. There's also different judgments that we can see in the veterinary workplace around money. Pet owners, we often have this sense that they think that we're greedy. Veterinarians just care about money. Or the veterinary team's perspective, right? Clients just want to guilt trip veterinarians into giving away services for free. They don't actually value the work that we do. And then last but not least, there can be a lot of assumptions. And I see this a lot, right? We have our clients that have been good clients coming to us for years and they think, are you kidding me? Now you're going to slap me with this $2,000 dentistry bill. Whereas we can have judgments on our clients as well. We see them roll up in their, Escalade or whatever nice vehicle. And we're thinking, well, they can certainly afford to pay for their pet's care. Or, we might have pet owners that are feeling a little bit bashful or embarrassed because maybe they don't want to spend all the money and they think that we are going to judge them as not caring because they don't want to pay for a procedure or something else. Whereas we might be thinking, the kids are really attached to that cat, so of course they're going to move forward with treatment. So at the end of the day, I always tell myself, I'm not going to judge. I'm not going to assume. I'm not going to, I'm going to try to put my preconceived notions to the side and just be open. And so that is what I'm offering to all of you today is to let go of those beliefs, those judgments, and those assumptions. We can never really fully understand what a family's wishes are for their pets and what their financial capabilities are. And I have been blown away with surprise on both ends of the spectrum. So instead, I'm going to present you with 10 strategies that I want you to try to follow instead. And these are all going to make these cost of care conversations more comfortable, more easeful, and hopefully they're going to also cut down on the number of complaints that you're having as well. So first and foremost, we need to understand clients' perceptions of the cost of veterinary care. Clearly, clients are way off base when it comes to predicting what the lifetime cost of pet care. Okay, so number one, they are working from a disadvantage when it comes to really recognizing that. This was some information from a focus group that was done decades ago where we really started to consider what pet owners' perceptions of the monetary aspects of vet care are. Pet owners said that they want the care of their pet to take precedence over the cost. They want care to be top of mind. Pet owners also want veterinarians to initiate discussions of cost up front, right? They don't want this to be like an afterthought or something that we just deal with later. They want to know this from the get-go. Now, what was interesting based on this research study is that it really seemed like when it came to cost of care and services, veterinarians really tend to focus on tangibles. How much time is this going to take me? What services am I offering? Versus pet owners really tend to focus on their pet's health, their outcomes, right? What does this mean for my pet? There was also sentiments already decades ago demonstrating that veterinarians really do feel undervalued for the work that we do. And I think that we've seen kind of a shift in this as we've started to charge more appropriately for our services. But nevertheless, this is partnered with pet owners inherently being from time to time suspicious, right? Why does it cost so much? Why is the veterinarian, asking me for so much money when it's just XYZ? So there is still a little bit of disparity there, which I think is still very persistent today. Now, if we look ahead to additional research, this was a focus group study of veterinarians and pet owners' perceptions of veterinarian client communication in companion animal practice. Hello, my love. Um, I have a guest here joining me home from school. So there was this perception in this focus group study that clients felt that they weren't always adequately informed about cost. In fact, they said, you know what, it's nice to know upfront how much we're going to have to spend. There was also the sentiment from clients that they weren't always presented with options, that they felt like they didn't always have a choice. And I love this quote that says, "There's nothing worse than feeling like you're handicapped and you don't know what to do. You're being shoehorned into a decision that you don't really want to be in." Now, sometimes, unfortunately, decisions are out of our hands, right? In a particular situation with a particular diagnosis, we might really be shoehorned into only being able to offer something. But I urge you as much as possible in your conversation. So, really wanting to make sure that, again, we're giving as much choice as possible. I'm going to really talk about that when I talk about client preferences. So, that is their perception. That is what they're coming into the situation with. What about with preferences regarding cost conversations? Well, I highlighted a lot of this in our last presentation that was sponsored by Trupanion when I talked about having open conversations about pet health insurance, framing it as a way to reduce our moral stress in these situations. And so this is something that I want to refer back to again. And this comes from the American Veterinary Medical Association's Language of Veterinary Care initiative, where they did a lot of focus group research and a lot of digging to really understand clients' preferences when it comes to improving veterinary care. And so, again, this came out of research in the United States, but of course, I think this has very broad reaching implications for pet owners around the world. And it really highlights that the way we talk about veterinary care really will influence a pet owner's perceptions about its value and about the cost. And at the end of the day, we want to make sure that a client's veterinary care is personal. They want to feel that their veterinary care and the subsequent cost is tailored for them and their situation. We also need to just, rather than justifying the cost of care, like this is our overhead and this is the time and this is the that. We want to show what the intention behind it is. How is this going to help my pet over the course of its lifetime? How is this going to benefit my pet's health? So again, starting with veterinary visits, right? Visits to the general practice. We want to help clients see regular checkups as opportunities to develop their relationship with the veterinary team. This is then going to allow the veterinarian to get to know them. And by getting to know them, we can then make personalized recommendations for that pet and that family, and also facilitate discussions around cost of care, right? So we want to think of veterinary checkups, regular appointments as opportunities for relationship building, which then customize the care and help to better explain the cost. So I'm also going to present to you some additional tips. So when it comes to what am I paying for, right? We want to avoid focusing on trade-offs and pro cons, right? Well, there's trade-offs to every approach. A client doesn't want to feel like if they can't afford particular care that they have to have plan B, right? Nor do they want to know about the pros and cons of each cost. They want to simply know that our experience and our expertise allows us to consider the balance of care and cost, to recognize that there is this tailored individual approach to how much things cost and to the care that we can provide. And so using language like, we will walk you through the personalized plan so that you feel comfortable with exactly how we're helping your pet and why. So again, pet owners really want to know that this is personalized and that there's going to be a collaborative discussion around the cost. Similarly, we want to avoid overstating that the preventative care can help with cost or that it can prepare for any future charges. So, for example, it's no secret that bills can become thousands of dollars to treat serious illnesses, but preventative care can help avoid these costs entirely, right? That's simply not true. There is no amount of preventative care that is going to negate any of the emergencies or diseases or other things that a pet might need to receive care for over the course of its lifetime. What we do want to recognize is that we can connect different options to cost saving preventative care. It's not completely removing all costs, but we might be able to help costs in the long term. So, for example, asking now about the options available to you can help ensure your pet is getting the routine care they need. This often ends up saving you money in the long run, right? We're not saying it always does, but we're saying that this is the hope. And pet health insurance is an option that can help defray the cost of veterinary care, both for routine evaluations and emergencies, right? So we want to introduce that there are options to help manage the costs associated. So I want to highlight the fact that I have covered a lot of language and approach and reasoning behind bringing up pet health insurance early on or even during emergency situations, not only to help the clients be able to recognize ways in which they can afford their pet's care, but also and probably more importantly, to help the well-being of the team. When the team members, any of them, are put in situations where clients can't afford care, they don't have pet health insurance, they end up having to make decisions like euthanizing an animal or not pursuing treatment that is recommended because of cost, that really can erode the morale of the team and of course lead to more serious consequences like burnout and compassion fatigue. So I talk about that in this webinar that I presented a couple of months ago. And here is the QR code for those of you that wish to watch the recording on our YouTube channel. Okay, so when it comes to client preferences, once again, there was a lot of work done by the AVMA to recommend that there is language that clients don't like. There's language that causes clients to disconnect. That is frequent, yearly, appointments, guidance, answers, or finances. They do not prefer that language. Instead, we want to use language such as routine or regular care, checkups, recommendations, budget, partner or partnership, flexible care, and treatment options. Okay, so we really do want to make sure that we are trying to use verbiage that is going to connect with our clientele. Okay, so that is what I have to share about preferences. What about our communication? Well, first and foremost, what I want you to take away is really this emphasis on communicating about cost early and often, okay? So there's research to demonstrate this was factors that influence small animal veterinarians' opinions and actions regarding cost of care and effects of economic limitations on patient care and outcome and professional career satisfaction and burnout. So that's a mouthful. That was the title of this paper. In short, what this study did was it surveyed more than 1,100 veterinarians working in small animal practice in Canada and the United States. And they were recognizing the harm that these economic limitations can have on the professional career satisfaction and burnout of veterinarians. And I talk about this study in the last webinar that we had that I just shared with you. At the end of the day, pretty much everybody surveyed believed that if we increase client awareness of veterinary cost, that this can enhance veterinary care and contribute to greater satisfaction, not just for veterinary teams, but for clients as well. So I think we can all agree, both based on the information that we have from pet owners and based on the information and sentiments that we have of veterinarians, we need to talk about money and we need to talk about it early and often. Okay? This is another study more recently that looked at the perceptions and differences in medical disputes between veterinarians and clients. And not surprisingly, a lot of disputes came down to cost, right? It's like I shared with you early when I shared those studies on client complaints. It often comes down to cost. So what this research study demonstrated is that we can reduce medical disputes between veterinarians and clients by obtaining informed consent for treatment and expenses. It's not just signing off on, I give consent for this surgical procedure to be performed. It is, I can recognize I give consent and I also give consent to the cost. And hopefully the cost is given in a detailed written form so that people can look it over, they can see exactly what the different costs are coming from, and they can make a truly informed decision from there. So, the other thing that we can do to talk about cost early and often is to introduce the idea of pet health insurance. Now, this doesn't necessarily have to be, handing over brochures and, forcing people into signing up for a provider. That's not at all what we're suggesting here. It can be as simple as introducing the idea to the owner. This might mean that on your intake paperwork where you're collecting your pet owner's information, you ask them, who is your pet health insurance provider? Some of them might say, "Oh my gosh, I saw that I saw that you mentioned that there's a pet health insurance provider. I didn't even know that existed. Can you tell me more?" Right? During your puppy and kitten exams, you can ask the question, what is your plan to cover the cost of care over your pet's lifetime? Right? Introducing this sooner, clients will be so happy to know that, oh my gosh, I had no idea that my cat might end up costing me $20,000 over its lifetime. I need to budget for that. I would love to hear some options. And even again, for me, coming from an emergency practice perspective and in the ICU, I still talk about pet health insurance with my clients. Of course, I cringe when they say to me, "Oh, if I sign up for insurance today, can that now cover this cost?" And of course, we all know about pre-existing conditions and some of the limitations that there are on pet insurance. But at the very first emergency visit, if a person especially has never been to the ER with their pet before, we can still say, you know what? There's a lot of families that choose pet health insurance to avoid this agonizing decision making that can come with urgent and unexpected visits and the cost of emergency care. What are your thoughts on pet health insurance? Or would you like me to share more about pet health insurance? And I am frequently advising owners, especially of young dogs that come in and they've had their first bout of eating, dietary indiscretion. They've eaten chocolate and boom, here's your bill in the hundreds and maybe over thousands of dollars, depending on how much chocolate they ate and what kind. And so let's be proactive and let's consider how we can cover these costs in the future. Okay. What we don't want to do is avoid talking about costs altogether, right? We want to make sure that we do talk about costs and we want to empower our clients to ask questions, right? What questions do you have about costs? Or would you like to talk about payment options? Or would you like to talk about different options to help cover the cost of care? Again, this is going back to the AVMA framework in terms of what pet owners prefer when it comes to having these conversations. Additionally, we want to avoid making statements to suggest that veterinary practices don't pay any attention to profit, right? Statements like, we're committed to not letting costs stand in the way of care, or no veterinary practice wants cost to be the reason your pet doesn't receive the care they need. Okay? Let's toss those statements aside because they are not helpful for clients. Because at the end of the day, we are businesses and we do have to pay our employees, right? We do need to buy new equipment. We do need to make a living. We are trying to stay afloat. And so we are hoping to earn some sort of profit. So to say that we're not paying attention to our profit is really not true, right? We're not trying to pull the wool over our clients' eyes, but again, it's not helpful to make those kinds of statements. We do want to instead address cost head on. So these are the preferred statements. Things like, your pet's health is my first priority, and I know that cost is also a consideration. So we can talk about these two together. Of course, we care about the pet's health. Of course, we want to do what's best for the pet's health. And we also have to weigh the cost, right? Even using statements like veterinary care can be expensive. Even the most loving and dedicated pet owners need to make difficult decisions around what they can and can't afford. So normalizing it, this is just a part of this this situation of owning a pet, unfortunately, right? Our pets aren't covered under universal health care like we are, thankfully, here in Canada. Some of my friends in the US that don't necessarily have that, but I think sometimes we take that for granted. Certainly, like I said, here in Canada, where a lot of our costs are covered by our universal health care. And so we want to make sure that we are having these conversations openly and honestly with our clients. So the fourth strategy that I have for you today is to address budget constraints openly and without any judgment. Okay? So what that means is that we don't immediately send our clients elsewhere if we find that they cannot afford the care, right? Because clients will not that's not what they want, right? When the AVMA did these research focus groups to really further develop how we can best talk to pet owners, clients did not want to be just shushed elsewhere, right? So saying things like, if our recommendations can't meet your budget, we're always happy to refer you to lower cost clinics or another practice that might be a better fit. While that might be an option farther down the line, don't make it the first option, okay? They don't want to go somewhere else. They're coming to you. They want your care. So first try to work with them. So that might mean offering different payment options. I know the vast majority of hospitals now have options like scratch pay and care credit and things like that. Have those options available. I know that these are not ideal. They come with very high I've lost my train of thought. Very high amounts that build up over time. Oh my goodness, I'm totally having a brain fart. Interest rates. Thank you. Interest rates. These aren't ideal, but we want to make sure that we have options. And most importantly, for our pet owners, we want them to recognize that we are committed to finding something that works for them and their budget, right? We're not just like, this is the option, take it or leave it, and otherwise we'll see you down the road. This is, you know what? We do have options. We want to help find something that works for you. Okay. Maybe that's payment plans, savings accounts, pet health insurance. It might not be something that helps in that moment, but let's talk about this at the very least for the next time that you have to come into the hospital. We also want to avoid putting the onus entirely on the owner. Okay. So I think kind of gone are the days of here's your options A, B, or C. At the end of the day, what you choose is your decision. Clients want to feel like you are partnering with them. They want to be recognized that not every treatment is right for every pet. Of course, they feel like their pet's special. They want to feel like you are walking them through the plan and figuring out with them how to balance their pet's needs with their budget. Okay. So saying something like, we believe in partnering on your pet's health, including choosing what is best for your pet and for your budget. Okay. All these things are taken into consideration together, and clients really, really appreciate that. Okay. Again, we also want to make sure that we avoid framing the cost conversation in terms of available treatment options. So we offer a wide range of care and treatment options for your budget, right? Instead, we want to make sure that when cost is a concern, that we say we are here to work with you to develop a personalized plan that will fit your budget. Okay. So being very mindful of the language. And I know that these are subtle differences here. I know Jamie's been very busy in the chat. And yes, we will make sure that we've got this recording available for you so that you can review that and use these prompts as is appropriate. Okay. So recommendation number 5 is to watch for signs of discomfort or dissatisfaction. So I'm seeing in the chat and somebody, I'm sorry, it's hard to keep up because the chat is just running a mile a minute. Number 4 topic was to address budget constraints openly and without judgment. And I know that some of you have mentioned, that a lot of the clients don't even qualify for scratch pay or care credit. And I will tell you, I spent a lot of time working in inner city Seattle at an emergency practice there, and we had many very low income or unhoused individuals that had no income, never mind no income. And, of course, they are not going to qualify for any sort of line of credit. And so I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. But in those situations, we do need to have other options available for them. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that coming up. But those situations can be situations when, they don't have pet health insurance. They can't afford what we're offering, or what we're offering still feels outside of the realm of what their budget can tolerate. That's when we can start to see our clients sometimes get a little bit prickly, as I say. This was my picture for prickly. So we want to watch for signs of discomfort or dissatisfaction. Be aware of your client's body language, right? And open up a conversation. You're being so quiet over there. Tell me what's on your mind. Or if they've mentioned to you, my budget is tight, allow that to be an opportunity to open up the conversation. Oh, you mentioned your budget is tight. The treatment we discussed is going to be expensive. Would you like to talk more about some different options before you make any decisions? Right? So open it up, recognize it, be empathetic to it, and address it head on. Don't wait until it escalates. Open-ended questions here can be incredibly helpful. Anything beginning with what, how, who, or where. We want to avoid questions starting with why, right? Clients, when they hear why, they get defensive. They feel like they have to explain themselves. So use phrasing like this. What part of this estimate feels most difficult for you right now? Or what budget are you hoping to stay within so that we can work from there? Or what feels doable for you today and what feels less manageable? How have you handled similar situations in the past? Or how can we adjust the plan so it works better for you and your pet? Okay, these are open-ended questions. They show that you are open to discussion. There's no judgment here. Let's figure it out together. Number 6 for strategies is to address frustrations about money head on. So I kind of refer to this, a little bit like the elephant in the room, right? This is where we can use our reflective listening skills to really meet the client where they are, right? We don't want to just ignore what they're saying. If they are voicing things, even if it is frustration, even if it is upsettedness, that's okay. Let's address that. So saying things like, it sounds like this situation feels overwhelming and the costs are adding to that stress. Or you're trying to do the right thing for your pet and these financial decisions are really weighing on you. Or it sounds like you're feeling really angry about the limited options available, and I can understand why this situation feels so unfair, right? Or I can hear the anger in your voice and it makes sense. You're facing a tough situation with very few choices. And then empathy, 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 drowning our patients in empathy, right? Genuine empathy, right? I think we have all been on the receiving end of an unexpected expense, whether your car broke down, whether you brought your own dog to the ER and you weren't expecting to have them there, whether the furnace broke, like you name it. We have all been in situations where it's like, oh my God, how am I going to pay for this? Right? So even if you're silently of the sentiment, come on, they should have known that their pet was going to need care. We still want to have as much empathy for the situation as we can. I can see how frustrated you are, and it makes sense. You weren't expecting this. Or I can appreciate how hard this must feel. No one expects to face these kinds of costs, and it's put you in a really tough spot. Or I can see how much you care about your pet, and navigating finances on top of everything else is incredibly stressful. Or this situation is a lot to take in, and it makes sense that you're feeling upset given how limited the options seem. Okay. So, really trying to meet our clients with as much empathy and understanding as we can. And clients are going to say, that's really expensive. They might even be indignant about it. And we want to address that head on. You're right. Veterinary care is expensive. And sometimes we're so used to having healthy animals that we forget how much it adds up when they're sick, right? Or if a client says vehemently, I can't afford this, then this is where we want to embrace those partnership conversations that the AVMA shares tips and strategies on. There are treatments and procedures that could be effective for what your pet needs, and we can work with you to develop those personalized options that fit your budget, right? So we can acknowledge that and address those conversations. What I don't want anybody to think is that addressing financial concerns takes extra time, means that you have to fix the concerns yourself. No, all this requires of you is empathy to show you understand and that you care. Okay? So, tip number 7 is to know what alternative options might be available. So, this goes back to what I shared when there really will be clients that just simply cannot afford the care, regardless of the options that you present. Obviously, we've already talked about pet health insurance for future situations, credit plans, which I know not everybody is going to qualify for. This is where you want to have a toolbox of people that you might be able to reach out to, or preferably that your clients can reach out to, whether there's rescue groups in your area, have a good relationship with the SPCA in your area. Encourage people to reach out to family members, friends. Maybe you decide as a practice that you are going to have client donations and fundraising so that you can have an allotment of a fund to use for cases that you know could have a positive outcome if they had just a little bit of financial support. And again, in certain circumstances, we might need to refer people to the Humane Society or to low-cost clinics in the area. We want to make sure that that is something that we do after we have tried to exhaust other options. Strategy number 8, at the end of the day, when it comes to these conversations, I don't want you to take it personally, okay? If you need to, separate yourself from the situation and try to consider the client's perspective. Clients will feel guilty, sad, embarrassed, or out of control when they can't pay. This can very easily translate to anger, but that anger is not about you. It might be directed at you because you're in front of them. And maybe their expectations are unrealistic. Like, can't you just do the surgery for free? Well, of course we can't do it for free, right? And so our clients are very good sometimes at shifting their emotional burdens onto you. And in those situations, it's really important that you have a little bit of distance, right? Make sure that you separate what is their distress and their challenge from what is your role in this situation, which is to advise, support, empathize, and try to help as much as you can. But at the end of the day, we can only do what we can do. Okay. Again, research shows that society's incivility has increased quite dramatically since the beginning of the pandemic. And so a helpful mantra for me has been the client is not giving me a hard time. The client is having a hard time, right? And again, I've been in those situations myself with those unexpected costs, be it veterinary, household, car, or otherwise. I think we can all relate, and it can be very distressing and upsetting. And now when you throw a beloved family member into the mix, you better believe there's going to be a lot of emotions. It's not about you. Tip number 9 is when things escalate, if they escalate, take care of yourself first, okay? Gather yourself and your thoughts. See if you can widen your window of tolerance. Your window of tolerance meaning your capacity to manage a stressful situation. What are some things that you can do to widen your window of tolerance to allow yourself to be able to have a conversation with the client when things are escalating? Breathing, right? Prolonging your exhale, expanding your belly. This activates the parasympathetic nervous system. It lowers your stress response. Pause for help, HELP, hydrate, eat, laugh, and pee. Not all at the same time, although that might occur in some circumstances, right? This is kind of your rescue. I need to drink something. Maybe I need a snack. Maybe I need to have a little chuckle with my team, go to the bathroom, and then I can face the situation head on. connecting with a loved one, a colleague, maybe stepping outside for some fresh air, some very cold fresh air from what I hear in certain parts of the country right now. And just, just quickly scanning your body and letting go of any tension, grounding yourself in the moment, taking care of you so that you can continue to take care of this client and their pet to the best of your ability. And then strategy number 10 is going to be all of our de-escalation strategies. So I'm going to finish off by sharing a whole bunch of strategies with you for how you can address these situations when they quote unquote go off the rails, so to speak. And the first one is to recognize that kindness campaigns, while well-intentioned, are not the answer. I am very sorry to say, but having signs in the waiting room telling clients to be kind and that abuse will not be tolerated is not going to make your clients behave any better. When clients are distressed about money, when they are embarrassed that they can't pay, when they feel guilty because they wish they had brought their pet in sooner so that it maybe wouldn't now be costing thousands of dollars, there's going to be big emotions there. Okay. The best thing that we can do in these situations to evoke kindness from our clients is to model that compassion, to be empathetic, to treat them with kindness, and to have healthy boundaries. I'm not saying that we tolerate putting up with client abuse. Absolutely not. But can we find every ounce in ourselves to have a little bit of empathy and compassion for the client's experience? I know it's hard when we're burnt out, and I know it's hard when we are already going through a lot of stress on our own, but this is what I urge you to do. And you want to watch for those warning signs of anger. We want to address the anger before it escalates. If you see a client clenching their fists, they're popping in and out of the exam room, they're fidgeting, their brow is furrowed, they're getting really short and clipped in their responses. Maybe they're ignoring, they're not making eye contact, they're pacing, they're raising their voice, their posture is stiff, they're tightening their jaw, right? Recognize that because we want to address it before it escalates. We also want to avoid poking the bear. Okay. So what we don't want to do is to, I'll show that client, he's being a jerk. So I'm just going to leave him in the exam room and let him simmer for a little bit. Not going to be helpful. Counter anger, also not helpful. Forcing an interaction, forcing a person to speak with you. If they're not online with their prefrontal cortex engaged and outside of their fight or flight response, it is not going to be a productive conversation for anybody, right? We also don't want to over-explain, excuse, or justify or prematurely try to fix anything. Stop, open up a conversation, and ask questions, okay, before jumping in when we haven't even heard the client yet, okay? So again, if a client is being rude or abrupt, stop for a moment and try to get their perspective and then express empathy wherever possible. So maybe they're frustrated, right? You can say it's understandable that you feel frustrated. This is a lot of money that you weren't expecting to spend today. That might be all you need to bring the emotion down. If a client is being passive aggressive, great. What? Another $2,000 bill today? Okay. They're saying this in a passive aggressive way because they don't feel like they can voice this upfront or directly. Okay. There is some reason for that where maybe they're embarrassed or they don't have the skill set. So if somebody is being passive aggressive, you want to recognize, where is this coming from? What is the anger underneath this sarcasm or whatever it is that they're voicing to me? So you say, I can tell that you're frustrated. What are you unhappy about? I'd like to help if I can. Clients that get angry. I don't know about you, but I am triggered by angry clients. I do not do well in the face of anger. This is an area that I've really had to work on. I want to tell you to remember that anger is always secondary. Get curious. Are they grieving? Are they frustrated? Are they sad? Are they embarrassed? What is underneath the anger? Because anger is not their primary emotion. Okay. Make sure that when you are having a conversation with an angry client, if you are fearful for your safety, you stand close to the door. Maybe you have somebody else present. Maybe you keep the door open, but you stay there committed to understanding the issue, not convincing, not justifying, not excusing. You stay there open and ready to receive. Now, again, I'm not saying that you stay there and let them yell and scream and abuse you. No, I have been in situations coming in with a full expectation of, okay, lay it on me. Tell me what's on your mind. Give it to me. I'm here. I want to hear what's on your mind. I will hear that for a certain time. And then when we move to solutions, if the client is still berating me, or if that has now escalated to name calling, insulting, and outright verbal abuse, then that is where I draw the line. And I tell the client, I cannot continue this conversation if you continue to speak to me that way. Okay, that is setting a boundary. Examples of helpful starter prompts. Again, in the name of de-escalation and opening up the conversation. I'm here to listen. I want to help. I want to hear more about your concerns. I want to hear more about what you're thinking. Choose the verbiage and the language that resonates with you. Body posture and tone of voice can make a huge difference. These are all the nonverbals, right? This is the majority of how we communicate is by nonverbal. Okay, so be calm, be attentive, be focused, right? Speaking slowly and softly. If our tone gets up really regulated and our pace goes high, that's going to bring up the energy. We want to bring it down. We don't want to face a person head on. We want to just kind of move off to a 30-degree angle, encouraging eye contact, but again, not staring them down, and try not to interrupt. Try to let them say what's on their mind. Give them a chance to speak. We want to, of course, validate and normalize what the client is experiencing. Again, given how unexpected this estimate is, it makes sense that you'd feel this way, right? There's that validation. I know the costs are a lot, and we'll go through the options together so that you're not facing this alone. So we're not minimizing the costs, but we are giving hope that we can come to a decision together. You can ask questions to identify the problem. What are you most worried about or frustrated with in this moment? And then some sort of open-ended offer to help. Tell me one thing I can do right now that would make this discussion easier, or tell me one thing I can do right now to help. There's a great book by Sam Horn called Talking on Eggshells, released a couple of years ago. And I love this sentiment. When a client complains, don't explain, right? So you want to agree with the client. And I know this is hard, but there's some truth probably in what they're saying. You have every right to be frustrated about the costs. I would feel the same way in your shoes, right? I'm sorry the situation is so stressful financially. And then we act. In the future, we'll make sure to go through the potential costs up front so that you can make decisions comfortably, right? Maybe this is a client complaint because they're like, I got slapped with this extra $1,000 bill I wasn't expecting. Well, I'd probably be frustrated too. So let's call that what it is, okay? I would also be very open to connecting people to your practice leadership, whether that's the practice manager, hospital manager, practice owner. Open it up. Say, what are your thoughts on having a conversation with our practice manager to share your concerns, right? Show that you want to help them have their concerns resolved. Our hospital manager is back again on Monday, and I'll leave a note for her to call you then. What is the best time and number to reach you? And then, of course, we document everything in the medical record, documenting the client's concerns and the plan for the follow-up conversations. Here's another great book, De-escalate. This one's from a few years ago, and they have their own algorithm for calming an angry person in 90 seconds or less. So this goes back to kind of the name it to tame it approach. So we listen first. Then we label the client's emotional experience. When the client calms down, we reflect back what they said about why they're angry. We categorize the problem. Is this within our control or outside of our control? We try to come to some sort of solution. And if you can, great, fix it. And if not, how can you help? How can you somehow take responsibility or pass it on to somebody else who can help? So, for example, a client's angry, right? They were slapped with this unexpected bill. So you say, you're really angry. You were told the dentistry procedure would be 800 and your bill is 1200. I'm sorry for not letting you know that the cost would be more with the additional extractions. I should have increased your estimate. What would you like me to do? Okay, I want a discount. All right, let me speak to the hospital manager about discounting your bill and get back to you, or let me connect you with a hospital manager. Okay. Okay, I want to finish off by sharing again, verbal or physical abuse is never okay. I'm not condoning that. We need to set boundaries. And whenever we set boundaries, we state them in the first person, right? Not you need to calm down. You can't tell somebody what to do or how to be, right? That's not humans don't work that way, right? And if they're anything like my daughter, the more you tell them to do something, the less they're going to want to do it. So instead, we state the boundary. I need you to lower your voice, or I need you to listen to me. I need you to listen to what I'm saying without interrupting me so that I can finish my explanation. Or I need you to lower your voice and stop swearing. Otherwise, I'm going to have to leave the room and we're going to have to end this conversation. So you are stating what you need and what you are going to do if your need is not met. So in a sense, you're telling them what to do, but you're not, if you get what I mean. Okay. And we need to tend to our own needs. I will 100% say anger triggers me. I have dealt with many an angry client in my career, and I am often the one that is called in to deal with these clients because thankfully I do have some of the skills necessary in order to do that, but I don't like it. It stresses me out. So I try to recognize that, be kind to myself, focus on the positives that come out of these conversations, get rid of that negative energy. For me, it's movement in the form of exercise, it's getting outside. I've been in practices where we've had dance parties like the Shake It Off. We've done, games, whatever you need to do to get it rid of the energy. And don't take it home with you, right? Let it go, be done with it. It's nothing to do with you. That is the client's stuff. Being self-compassionate, engaging in self-care, all of these things. Now, I want to go back to what I said before about the about the kindness campaigns. This is something that the AVMA came out with um, as an alternative to the kindness campaigns. And these are agreements, right? This is called the Positive Pet Care Guide. As a client, you can expect to da 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 da. And in return, we ask that you da 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 da. So just like we will treat our clients with respect, we expect that they will do the same for us. So these are mutual agreements that we are agreeing upon. Okay, I have been through so much content, and I want to get to your questions. I know the chat has been blowing up. But before we do that, I want to thank Trupanion once again for their generous sponsorship. They are very invested, of course, in supporting clients and more importantly, also in supporting veterinary team members that support the clients. So we couldn't have this well-being and communication focused content without them. We would also love to hear your thoughts. If you like this content, please do share. Here's a QR code where we would love to get your feedback on this particular webinar, suggestions for future webinars, and so on and so forth. So please do share your experience with us. And excuse me, I'm going to open it up for questions. I know that Andrea has been waiting in the wings, gathering up these questions, so I'm ready.
All
Fire
right. Well,
away.
I'm glad you're ready. We have quite a few, so we'll try to get to as many as we can in the time that we have.
Okay.
Hold on, we get my place here. We had a great question from Dana. What about when a client says they cannot apply for outside credit and they beg for a payment plan directly through the clinic?
Mm. Yeah, that's totally up to your clinic in terms of what you choose to do. I don't think that many clinics do payment plans anymore, I have to be honest. I think a lot of clinics have been burned trying to do payment plans in the past, but I've also worked at clinics relatively recently that do still offer some sort of plan, right? This is where we do really want to personalize care, getting to the root of like, and genuinely, I remember doing this, like I said, with some of our very low income folks in Seattle, where we would say, like, what can you afford, and can we, in good faith, ask you to come back next week and pay something more, whatever it might be. And maybe you're not going to recoup the whole bill. If you're okay with that as a practice, that is up to you. That is not a question that I can answer. That is very, very practice dependent. But unfortunately, yeah, outside of credit options, it would come down to the practice offering a payment plan. Great question.
Let's see, a question from Lindsay here. What does a proactive cost of care conversation look like initiated by the veterinary team? What does it sound like in reality?
Oh, yeah. So, gosh, there's so many different prompts that I shared, and I would urge you to go back into the webinar that we had last go around, because there's so many ways that we can introduce this. So, I think about even going into a general practice visit, right? You can probably estimate that there's going to be vaccines, maybe there's going to be dewormer, maybe there's going to be a microchip, whatever it is, to open it up there and say, hey, when you take your history, thank you so much for sharing this. And to be, to recap things, this is what I understand you're here to see the vet for today. Would it be helpful for me to go through those costs with you ahead of time? Or how would you feel about me presenting you with an estimate for costs ahead of it? Or what other plans do we've talked a lot about preventative care and deworming and all of these other things. What have you given thought to in terms of paying for your pet's care over the course of its lifetime? So again, asking those open-ended questions. I want people to normalize this. It doesn't have to feel personal or uncomfortable or weird or awkward. Um, you know, Gosh, I think about it again, like when I take my car to the shop, like I want to know how much it's going to cost. Like I'm happy when I drop off my car and they're like, yeah, you can expect to come back and this is what you're going to pay. And that's before the mechanic has even looked at the car. So not that I want to liken veterinarians to mechanics, but for those opening up this appointment with the family members, hey, would it be helpful for me to share some of the different options that we have to cover the costs of care? And I talked about it last time as well. If you own a pet and you have your own experiences with pet health insurance or with budgeting for your pet's care or with wellness plans, which is something that your practice might offer, please feel welcome to share your personal experiences. Clients love that, especially for our support team members. You can share, what, I'm on a bit of a restricted budget myself. And this has really been helpful for me. Clients really, really do appreciate it. So those would be some quick tips that I would give.
Yeah, that's great. We do have several more questions, so you let me know when we need to start wrapping it up.
Keep it
Um,
coming.
okay, great. So Siobhan asked, do we know if vet students are exposed to these soft skills that you discussed in tonight's webinar?
Yeah, so great question. Depends on where they go to school. So I'm happy to say that there are many, many, many more schools offering training in communication. I think we have really, really come a long ways from when I went to vet school 25 years ago now. I had zero, well, okay, I had an afternoon of communication training when I went to vet school. And then I did some very intensive training after I left, especially when I joined the Ontario Vet College, who was building out their communication programs. So I did training, I became a coach, and then I've since continued to develop that training. So I can say across the board, cannot speak for FMV in Quebec, but certainly at our other Canadian vet schools, there are developed curriculums in communication. They do talk about some components of addressing cost, informed consent, etc. However, as a wellness advocate, I would like to see them spend more time on how do we approach these situations when things go badly? I don't think they necessarily get enough time spent on difficult clients or challenging client situations, the nitty gritty of the cost of care conversations. And unfortunately, that's just a matter of time. They just don't have enough time in the curriculum to cover everything. So, of course, that's why we have CE like this. There's great communication CE at conferences as well. So I urge you and your team members to really prioritize this CE. It's also not covered in all of our technician schools. So we want to make sure that all members of the team, CSRs, techs, vets, everybody are getting this sort of content. So if you're working with new team members that have recently graduated, I would ask them, what sort of communication training did you get in school? And if the answer is really not a whole lot, then we need to think about optimizing these sorts of opportunities for them. But we've come a long way.
Yeah, well, that's good to hear. And
Yeah,
I love um, that they are teaching more in school and in vet schools now, which is great. And also,
absolutely.
it's hard, if you never heard it in live in a real world environment, it's hard to emulate it. It's hard to kind of make it your own. So I'm glad we're certainly talking about this. Um, this came in as an anonymous question, but our clinic collects a $250 ahead of time, or, excuse me, collects a deposit of $250 ahead of time of the visit. We get a lot of pushback. Do you have any recommendations on how to explain this in a more empathetic way?
Gosh, I mean, I think, again, I relate so much of this to my personal experience. Certainly for me, when I'm coming to a business for the first time, especially if it's a long appointment, it is really commonplace now for businesses, especially when you're booking online, to take a deposit up front. Right. And so I think about all, and at first I might be like, oh, like what? I've never even been here and they're already taking my money. But at the same time, we can empathize with the fact that there's a spot being held for them. There may be a long wait list to be getting into the practice. Especially, I know a lot of clinics will do this if they have more than one pet coming in at an appointment, if it's like a 2 or 3 pet appointment, because they've blocked off a lot of time. Again, this is a practice decision, and I would explain why you're doing it. The best thing that you can do is explain, why are you taking these deposits up front, is my question for you. Is it because you have had a lot of cancellations and no-shows and you want to make sure that your appointment schedules are filled? That's what I would share with your clients, right? Is it because you want to make sure that you're maximizing your schedule so that you can have spots open for same day appointments and people don't have to wait to come in for an emergency? That's what you want to share. I mean, I think at the end of the day, I can imagine you're doing this again to prevent people from not showing up, right? You want them to be invested not just in their calendar, but also financially so that the impetus is there to follow through with the appointment. And so I think explaining that at the end of the day, this is helping everyone because this is really making sure that the appointments are filled, that people show up. And I would guess that there's probably some sort of repercussion if they don't, for example, that you hold part of the finances. I haven't known many practices to do this routinely. Like I said, I know most practices will do this if it's a new client or if it's a multi-pet appointment, or some sort of long, like a behavior consultation, right? Something that's going to take a long time and that is going to have a higher cost associated with it. And again, I would just really emphasize that we're really wanting to make sure that this is a policy of the practice for our new clients or our multi-pet appointments. We want to make sure that we are keeping our appointment spots filled and so that we can serve our clients to the best of our ability. I'm
Great.
sure the wording can be nuanced, but that's what I would focus on.
I think Colin is asking a really interesting question here, a really poignant question. Professional burnout, changing careers, which they have seen multiple times with their colleagues in the profession. How concerned should we be for the overall well-being of veterinarians?
Oh, wow. Okay. I feel like that's a huge question for like a whole other webinar. So thank you for that question. Um, oh gosh, I don't know how succinctly I can answer this. I will say what I know based on the research, and that is that about 1/3 to a half of veterinarians and team members are experiencing burnout currently. We know that in Canada and the US, burnout is higher among veterinarians compared to the general population. We know that our support team members, including our techs and assistants, have higher rates of burnout than veterinarians and practice managers. We also know that practice owners have lower rates of burnout than practice associates. So we know it's an issue. How concerned should we be? Well, I wouldn't be doing this work if I wasn't concerned. So, concerned but optimistic. I think we're we're kind of done talking about the research and we're getting more now into research. Excuse me, we're kind of done talking about the stats and we're doing more research now to look at what can be helpful. And we're identifying many, many different things, not the least of which is these cost of care conversations. It's moral stress, like what we talked about in our last Trupanion sponsored webinar. We're learning we have learned what the contributors are to burnout, and now we are looking at strategies to make things better. I do believe that we can make things better. I do believe that we can fix things. And I also want to highlight the fact that burnout is not a veterinary specific problem. Most of our industries today are facing higher levels of burnout than ever before. So some of this is societal, and we could talk all day about that or all night, but I do have hope. And I do have concern, which is why we're here having this conversation.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. So we are
Mhm.
10 minutes over. Do you have a couple more questions if we're okay to take them, or we
Let's do it,
can?
Andrea. I'm
Okay,
okay with it.
all
Yeah,
right,
for
great.
sure.
Um, Question from Madison here is, do we have examples of procedures or best practices you've seen in hospitals that have sorry, do you have any examples of procedures or best practices you've seen hospitals implement that facilitate healthy cost conversations?
Practices or procedures? We might have to connect offline because I'm not sure I understand what you're asking. I think every practice is different in terms of the workflow, who initiates these conversations. I think very often it does start at the front desk. Most practices will still want a veterinarian to be involved only because a lot of the times the treatment and diagnostic decision making is tied so closely to the cost. Personally, for me, I really like it when I have support from my other team members to help me engage in those cost conversations. But at the end of the day, I recognize that the client is really looking to me to help them figure out what they can really afford based on what I'm recommending. So again, it's a bit unique for me because I'm in the ICU and ER, so it can get very costly and it can be very nuanced. But I can have some really well-trained team members that can also really help support me in going through the written estimate with the client, answering their questions, learning their preferences, figuring out where their budget is. Again, it just so depends on the team, your workflow, how well you're trained, your support team members are, and yeah, how you want to handle those situations. But I'm certainly happy to help if you want to reach out to me directly.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that.
Hmm.
One last question here that's actually really directed at Trupanion. So
Okay.
I'll share Haley's question here. Um, Trupanion doesn't cover heartworm treatment because it's considered preventable, but at least 80% of their patients are rescues. So it's hard to call it preventable when they didn't have anyone caring for them before.
Mm,
Other parasites and preventable diseases are covered, but not heartworm. Has this been considered? And so, Haley, really appreciate the question. We do absolutely consider all of these treatment and coverage options. I would say, to help maybe further answer this question, which might be actually a good segue to the next slide here, is we'd love for you to connect with your territory partner, your local territory partner rep for Trupanion, who can help really dig into some of these coverage questions with you on a one-on-one basis and give you there's just some help in navigating some of these coverage questions that may be very specific to you, your pets, or your particular clinic.
mm,
And so really appreciate the question. And yes, we do consider, how we can best provide the most coverage for pets, especially for some of these things that aren't the pet's fault because they might not have had owners previously.
mhm. Thank you, Andrea. I see that there are a few more open questions. Do you want me to address those?
Yes,
I've
please.
seen them in the Q&A. I can see one from Morgan asking about clinics taking checks. We've had several checks bounce, so that form of payment is very difficult, but it has to be an option. I know very few practices that accept checks anymore. In fact, I think the cost to the client to get checks is the same, if not even more than what it would cost for them to send an e-transfer. So I wonder about other options. I mean, unless we're talking about post-dated checks, I do think that it's become pretty well the norm for practices to only accept forms of payment that include debit card or credit card or cash. So don't feel like you are outside of the norm if you don't accept checks, because I think that there's very few practices that are accepting checks anymore. Businesses in general, really, at the end of the day, I don't know many that accept checks. Lindsay asked the question, what advice can you provide for time management and implementing some of these steps? They just don't have time. There's so much to discuss, the what ifs. Um, I get it for sure. I guess my short answer is if we don't take time to address this early on, you're going to be taking time to address it later, either when you're addressing a complaint or when your clients are unhappy or, something happens down the road. So I would really urge you to look at this as a necessary proactive part of your overall appointment. Maybe it's not the veterinarian having this conversation. Maybe it is the team member, right? That's opening up the conversation when they do the history to say, hey, we've got this information pamphlet. Maybe again, one of your team members puts that together. Sharing, you can find the average annual cost of care for animals in Canada, animals in the US. All of that information is out there. We've got this pamphlet, and we want to make sure that we're letting all of our clients know that we do have a lot of options for managing costs of care. We're happy to discuss those options with you. Please do let us know if you have any questions about that or whatever it is. Maybe it's not at the first puppy appointment, but maybe it's at the third puppy appointment, right? Having kind of a checklist of, okay, at puppy appointment number one, I'm going to talk about dewormer, and number two, I'm going to talk about neutering, and number three, their final one, I'm going to talk about cost, right? I mean, again, I would do it earlier than later, but structuring it somehow. Again, I really feel like I know for me, I have been burned when I kind of just think, oh, they're just going to have to pay for this. It's going to get figured out. And I've really learned to bring it up early and know that we have this sense that asking an open-ended question is going to take longer. But the research that Jason Coe and colleagues have done at the OVC demonstrates that we're talking just seconds longer. We're not adding minutes and minutes of time to our appointments. If we can ask an open-ended question, what questions do you have about the cost? Or how do you plan to manage the cost of your pet's care over the course of their lifetime? You are going to get so much information back versus asking, are you okay with the estimate? Does the bill look all right? Is everything good? And then maybe not get anything back. Okay. How can we respond to a client at checkout when they're complaining about the cost and we know we can't discount or adjust the price? I feel like I manage that in a lot of the de-escalation components. Again, reflective listening. Yeah, I can see that you're not happy with the cost. I can tell that you're angry. This wasn't what you were expecting, or this is more than what you expected. What can I do to help? Right? So being open and non-judgmental, empathetic to them, and opening up a conversation. And maybe there is something that was miscommunicated. Maybe there is a reason why they can't, why they're complaining, right? They're complaining about something, and maybe it's not just the actual cost, or maybe once you open it up to conversation, they just sort of harumph, well, it's just, lots of cost this time of year. Okay, yeah, you know what? It's hard this time of year. We get it. We get that. It's tough for all of us, right? So really being empathetic as possible. Gosh, I feel like these keep going, Andrea. Leslie has a question about a team member who refuses to take accountability for how she handles difficult conversations like this. How do I coach her? Probably a conversation for us to have offline, Leslie. We've got a lot of resources on Reviving Vet Med's website. I'll forward ahead to that, and I do want to give Andrea the opportunity as well to acknowledge Trupanion and their commitment here. But if you go to revivingvetmed.com, we've got some handouts on navigating difficult conversations within our team. And that includes being very specific about their behaviors, the impact of their behaviors, and then giving them suggestions, right? I approach team members just like I approach clients, with a lot of empathy, right? With some open-ended questions, with some reflective listening, and then some human to human connection, right? Some thoughts about what might be helpful. Um, Prep owners for changes in advance to make the transition easier, trying a scope. Yeah, okay. So this is a great question from an anonymous person. How do we approach situations where great example from the ER, right? A animal has a foreign body in their stomach. We're going to start with endoscopy. And if that doesn't work, we're going to have to convert to a gastrotomy procedure, a surgery. I give the entire cost up front. Okay. So it is an if this, then that scenario, right? So some clients actually don't want to do the endoscopy if they know that they might have to convert to gastrotomy. If the total amount is a cost barrier for them, then that's something we want to have talked about up front. And then maybe we want to cross the endoscopy off the list and do what we know is going to work, which is gastrotomy. So if there is an if this, then that situation, if we do this tooth extraction and the root breaks and there's I don't know, I'm not a dentist, but then they have to go to a dentist. This is going to be the cost. They might say, you know what? I just want to go straight to the dentist. So have that conversation up front. Make sure that they would be okay with the potential costs in their entirety. Now, we have to be careful that we're not catastrophizing. We're not like, this could be $20,000. And anything could get up to $20,000. And we don't want we would prefer that clients don't euthanize their pets too soon, right? So we don't want to be unrealistic or outlandish with our estimates. But if you know that the cost of a scoping is 4 grand and the cost of gastrotomy is 5 grand, and this could end up costing the client up to $10,000, that is absolutely a conversation that you need to have up front, because that could determine what they choose to do in that situation. So that's what I would say to that. Great question. Andrea, I'm going to let you take that question from Vesna. How do we handle payment from Trupanion for a client that is from Canada, but they were seen in California?
Yeah, that's a great question. So these do get just a little more complicated because of the exchange rate, but we can still make sure that a pet that is seen cross borders gets the care that they need, and that they can still utilize Trupanion just like they do for other clients. So sometimes, again, just the exchange rate is the only thing that causes a little bit uh, of complexity there, but we still want to rest assured that that's, if you have it, if when your clients have Trupanion, that's why a lot of times they choose us, not only because we can pay you directly, but also because it works in Canada and in the US. So again, thank you so much, Dr. Marie, for all of your words of wisdom and your talking points tonight. I think it's really helpful for these cost of care conversations. Please get connected with us at Trupanion. If you have more questions, we have our dedicated team of support, not only who are local in your area, called our territory partners, but also a really wonderful team available to you at Trupanion. We're 24/7. So please scan this QR code if you'd like to get connected and to learn more. I really appreciate you spending your evening with us tonight. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much once again, Andrea, and thanks everybody for sticking around. I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of their night.